Hey everyone, my name is Mitch Dyer. I am joined by John Ryan.
Hi there, Mitch.
John Ryan, we're doing the Rewind Theater for Dishonored 2, and first things first, you've noticed something really weird about this mask.
I did. It boggles my mind. First off, I'm super excited for this.
Me too.
This made me really happy. But the thing is, like, you'll notice the mask. I thought at first, and we both kind of thought that it was floating on the ocean here, and then gets sucked down into it. But it's actually not floating. It's hovering just above the water.
The physics of it don't really make sense, and I thought this thing, you can see the shadow coming in from the left. I thought that was the mask shadow of it getting dropped.
But it's not, because you can see it underneath the mask directly underneath.
Right. So I think there's something in there that is pulling it down, or something that is pushing it in, but there's some kind of force being applied to Corvo Atana's assassin mask that caused it to just shoot into the water.
Yeah, and the cool thing, though, is, like, this is a game world where that's totally plausible.
Sure.
There's a lot of otherworldly nonsense happening. And
Yes.
it's really interesting to see where it might go after the last game.
Absolutely. So we fade in here. We're going to get our first good look at the seaside town of Karnaka.
There it is, right there.
So
Look
there's
at
a
that.
lot to sink into here. I mean, you see this town. You see these windmills here in the foreground. It shows that whale oil isn't necessarily the only source of power in Dishonored anymore.
You can see what looks like either power lines or maybe a gondola lift going up far into the mountains in the background there.
Maybe both. I don't know. Dishonored is weird. If you go back a little bit again, just back to that seaside shot. On the right side here, I don't know what this is. Like, are these cannons sticking out from the
They
side?
would appear to be either some kind of, like, artillery devices, or maybe even if we've progressed far enough into the future. I think it's 15 years after the original Dishonored this takes place. Maybe it's some kind of landing pad, because you can see something on the second one in from the left here that looks like it might be able to take flight.
Oh.
So I think that would be a really
like
interesting addition.
A little drone-looking guy.
Well, because we had the stalkers who could move around on their stocky legs,
absolutely.
and we saw a bunch of, like, cool-looking, like, ships. But it would kind of make sense where we see a lot of the art style here as we're going forward kind of switches to a little bit more turn of the century, a little early 1900s.
A lot more vibrant than Dishonored 1 as well.
But even in the guards' outfits, they look more like French legionnaires than they used to look like London patrols.
Good call.
So it looks like it's like, if it was real-world time, you could say it's like 1910, 1912, and the advent of wacky flying machines.
My favorite part that I just noticed in this moment is on the far right. You can see Popeye.
Where now?
This dude looks like Popeye with his humongous forearms. He just looks like Popeye.
Well, unfortunately,
Popeye's about to eat it.
Yeah. I think it's also funny that right here, Karnaka, which is the new city that we're in.
Yes.
Which is the birthplace of Corvo Atana.
Yeah, that's where
Corvo
Atana was born, and it's the home place of the bone fragments from the Knife and Dunwall DLC.
Yeah. So you can see the sign right behind. We'll call him Popeye for now. It says Karnaka needs workers, and these guys are very clearly day laborers.
Yeah.
So it's an unfortunate sort of irony as to what's happening here. We also want to track back just a little bit to the graffiti on the walls here. You can see on the far left it says the Crown Killer is watching.
Indeed.
And I'm curious as to whether or not that's a reference to Corvo, because he was originally blamed for the Empress's murder in Dishonored 1. Or
Emily's mother.
Yes, Emily's mother. Or if it's a reference to possibly the assassin Dowd, who actually killed the queen. And then also, once we move past these two guys, you can see them clearing away the bodies. Somebody is also very upset with someone known as the Duke.
Yep.
We don't really know who that is yet for certain, but we might get a glimpse of him later on.
We also, very quickly, we get looks at the automata, the robots that are kind of patrolling around with the Authority. Like, these guys here, the guys you see casually walking by, like, they don't really need to worry about anything, because the robots are kind of taking care of the business for them, right?
Yeah.
He had the sword up to Popeye's mouth there. So it's just like, don't move. Like, you're going to die, but I'm going to make sure that you don't move.
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at some really cool new enemy types as we're going through this trailer. And we're going to go forward just a little bit. There she is.
I love this.
There's the first shot we get.
Yeah, in this moment, during the E3 press conference when Bethesda showed this trailer, the entire room at the exact same time went like, is that a woman?
Did
they just show a woman?
What?
And it didn't even dawn on me that it could possibly be Emily.
Yeah, that was a really great twist.
So this, as we get a look at this here, I mean, this is probably the electrical system we were talking about.
Yeah,
this
it looks almost like
either
a train track.
It's some kind of like rail suspension bridge thing.
But it also, you can see it cuts off as well.
Right.
So I'm interested to see if maybe it's like a dual track system where like kind of like, I don't know, like a roller coaster or something, where like you'll go so far on a track and then it'll continue. Oh, that'd be rad.
That'd be great.
So we go a little bit further as Emily jumps back down. You can see there's a lot of civil unrest. Things are kind of falling apart in the city. But you can see in the graffiti over here it says, "Coin or blood, pay what you owe."
Coin or blood, or coin of blood?
I think that's an R. It's a little blurry, but I'm pretty sure it says coin or blood. So it's basically dealing with just like, if you wrong somebody, you've got to take care of that debt. And then you can also see here on the left, right before we see this really mangled dude, it says Howlers Come at Night, which might be a reference to the feral infected that we saw in Dishonored 1, because especially being right next to this guy.
Right. I mean, this is definitely a look at some new kind of pestilence going on. In the first game, we had the rats infecting the cities. Now it's this like weird, gross, almost underwater-looking thing.
Yeah, they're almost like magpies, and it looks like they've kind of nested somehow.
They're like weird crow locusts.
Yeah,
it's so gross.
It was a great design, though.
Stop! Just get out of here, John.
All right, fine.
Stop it. You notice there might be some back there, like infesting some of the buildings too. Like,
yeah, it makes me wonder, like, whether or not this. We'll assume it's a new kind of plague or some kind of disease.
It's almost fungal.
Yeah, but I mean, you can clearly see it here. It's attached to the side of that building.
Right, it's hanging off the street lamp there.
And I'm curious, like, we're clearly in Emily's POV here, and it doesn't seem to be that she's particularly worried about these things, so I'm curious if this might be another situation like the rat powers, where you could summon rats if you had a high chaos ranking.
Right, maybe she can take control of them, maybe she's getting out before they become a real threat.
Right.
So this is our first look at Emily's new power. I mean, we're just getting ahead of ourselves in that we are playing as Emily Caldwin here.
Yeah.
But the way that she navigates this world is really interesting, right? Like, she just kind of pulls her hand back, shoots it out, and this tendril shoots out, latches onto a ledge. She just yanks herself at it very quickly.
Yeah.
It's a very long-range version of the blink that we had with Corvo, and to a lesser extent Dowd. His operated differently.
But I'm curious to see if you need to actually have a tether point, because with blink you could just kind of pop to a certain area, and you use that in a lot of puzzles to like get above something and then drop down onto it.
Right. Does this automatically attach to whatever hits first?
Right. Can you use it against enemies?
How far does it go?
Yeah. And this is the first look we get at who I'm going to assume is the Duke, but I could be very, very wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You and I had a conversation about what he talks about at the end, right? Like, when Emily kills him, he says, you'll become one of us.
We'll get there.
Different conversation. All right. But we don't know what this guy's role is. We don't know if he's the Duke. We don't know if he's an assassin.
It seems, though, that he is a disciple or follower of Sokolov, the mad scientist from the previous game.
So my theory, I think he might be a descendant. Like, he's got this giant desk here. He's got whale oil there on the left. Do you see the shiny blue canister?
Yep.
He's got all sorts of trinkets and stuff. He's got the magnifying glass. Like, this guy is a scientist, or at least he likes to tinker with machines.
Yeah.
So there's something there. I mean, that's connected to Sokolov, maybe just like you said, disciple. But I also think he could be a descendant.
Maybe. It's very possible. I mean, enough time has passed where he could have been like a bastardized child or something like that. Now I think this moment here that we see.
Before we proceed,
back
I'm
so excited, though.
Back a little bit.
I
know this is incredible. And it does give us some insight into this guy's kind of personality. As she reaches for the door, you can see she's got cloth over her left hand.
There it is.
So she covers, like, as she enters his room, he calls her out saying, like, you cover yourself up and I know who you are.
Yeah.
She covers her face to hide her identity. She covers her hand to hide the outsider's mark. Corvo?
Which you clearly see later on. Corvo does not cover it up.
No, he's just wearing it loud and proud.
Well, maybe it's one of those things like she is, or at least was, at some point, an empress.
Sure.
So perhaps it became an issue for people.
Man, it just hit me that, like, she's an empress and now she's an assassin.
Right?
That is so good.
So this really tickles my fancy for a couple of reasons. First off, it just looks so cool.
There's so much going on. It's incomprehensible, but the aesthetic of the room changes, the structure, everything about it.
And the thing about
that makes sense in a weird way.
Really intrigues me is that in Dishonored 1, part of the game, like if you really wanted to do like a really positive stealth through with very low chaos and stealth kills, you really needed to know your environment super, super well. And the fact that everything is changing here, and you could see like the nice like golden parlor, or you could get this weird secret machine shop. And it's totally possible that might not be the case, and I'm just plucking strings in the air. But I think that would be really amazing if, the first time you play through something, for example, maybe it's completely different than if you, like, walk back into the same room 5 minutes later.
Sure, yeah. Like, maybe it's an alert thing. Like, he knows she's coming, so he sets this up for her.
Yeah.
That said, I mean, he clearly doesn't care that she's coming. He seems very confident.
Yeah. Here we get a look at one of her ranged weapons. This is clearly an updated version of Corvo's crossbow from the first game. It looks like it's got a scope, some new explosive bolts, maybe some incendiary ones as well. And then there's
again, you get to look at when she uses the tendril, you get to look at the outsider's mark kind of burning its way through her hands.
Clasp it back a little. There it is. You can see it
lighting it up.
Yeah.
It's cool because it's not like, I don't know. I feel like she almost doesn't have control over that thing in some way. Like she shoots it out and then she just kind of grabs on.
Yeah, as if it's some kind of just like manic extension.
Right.
Well, maybe that's kind of what we're going to see because, you know, with Corvo we kind of struggled with his accepting of the powers that he was given. Yeah. And maybe that's going to be part of Emily's story as well because, I mean, it's pretty much, it's confirmed that you can play as both of them.
Yes. Well, either or for your campaign. I mean, you commit to one, right? You play as Emily this time through, you play as Corvo this time. I wonder if that it's going to affect the length of the campaign, right? Like,
quite possibly.
Is it going to be a shorter campaign that is replayable?
Yeah.
Or is it a massive game with 2 campaigns?
But maybe we'll see Emily trying to have to really understand these powers and get a handle on them.
So I love this reveal, this money shot of like, here's Emily Caldwin. This is 15 years later. I like the little bird brooch.
I'm not sure if that's significant to anything. I want to say it's a logo that we'd seen before, like at her mother's house.
I couldn't find anything on it, but it really does look familiar. It's also just cool. I love these automata she's fighting as well. These, like, they have like these giant
the new creature designs
monkey faces on the back.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting too because like we can see here they're clearly all machine. They're all automated, and it's kind of an interesting jump from where we were in the first Dishonored.
Yeah.
Because in the first one it was very much a melding of man and machine, like with the stalkers patrolling around and with the augmented guards and the dudes with like the music boxes.
Yeah.
It was a fusion of men and machine, and now it's all automated. Everything is created to exist on its own.
Yeah. Go back and let's watch that fight one more time, real quick.
In nice super slow-mo.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that she never hits this thing. Like, she loses this fight. She busts out the sword and loses the fight. Also, we didn't really go over it, but she can freeze time, similar to Corvo, right? Like, she can slow time to the point where it stops
it's clear that some of the outsider abilities are holdovers or
very similar to Corvo's, but with a unique flair for her. See, she's attacking this thing. She's missing it constantly. It's missing her.
She's mostly just working on avoiding getting stabbed.
And she just bounces. She is out. She puts the sword away. She just leaves and sets a trap. So she's going to throw down this arc mine. And I really wonder if you can fight these things head on.
I would be interested to try. I'm sure that like once we get hands on, like once later on in the game, you get like super leveled up and become like an all-powerful outsiders warrior. You can probably fight them one-on-one, but early on, I can imagine that it'd be very difficult. Here we go with another revolution, I guess. And this is an interesting power to me too, because I mentioned this to you in a little chat we were having earlier. Like when she first uses the tendril arms, you don't see a real change in the game world or in the like.
Right, like her hand lights up blue a bit.
Right, but the coil itself kind of comes out of the arm and like surrounds the arm.
Yeah.
But this turns her into
transforms
smoke.
her. Like she's a different. She's this weird like ink monster.
Yeah.
This is so weird, and this is as the house is like shifting shape, so there's a lot going on. But this is just so strange. It's not like obviously anything Corvo had or Dow had. It's very grim as well. Like she's the bleakness of the visuals.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to know if maybe she's like an extra special kind of outsider was chosen.
Right. And I just
because of her importance and because of her connection to the crown, if maybe he granted her a little bit of extra oomph.
This also, I have to imagine, is one of the chaotic upgrades. Like, there's no way that, like, a no-kill character is going to be able to do this, right?
Maybe, though. I mean, maybe you can use it to, like, climb on ceilings and try and avoid people and, like, wisp. Because it's the kind of thing with, like, the duck thing from Thief, where you can just kind of, like, stealthily whoosh to another area of the map. Yeah. But this is the thing that we were talking about earlier, is where he's talking about blaming her for being an assassin that everyone thinks she is and becoming one of them.
So you and I have differing opinions on this. Becoming one of, like, you'll become one of us.
Yes.
I think he's talking about being a murderer. Like, I think this guy's just not a good dude.
Being a bad person.
Sure.
Whereas I'm a little more. I feel like that means a specific group of people. Like maybe it's like an extension of Dowd's group of assassins, or another type of, outsider worshippers or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it'll be very interesting to see how that actually plays out. And then of course we get. The really great shot of the outsider, also for the first time in Earthrealm, I guess. I mean, we see him a little bit in the first game, where he kind of opens up a rift and's like, "Hey, Corvo, like you should totally like do this," but you never see him like walking around.
Sure, yeah.
And so I think it's interesting to see him kind of in our own world.
It's also just very weird that Corvo's mask. I mean, we have the symbolism of his mask in the very beginning being pulled underwater or pushed or whatever happened there that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And just being drifted onto the beach for him to find.
Yep.
There's a lot of talk about fate in this trailer, and that seems very appropriate. That said, he's the kind of guy. The outsider is the one who controls his own destiny. He makes other people's destinies.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's weird that he like, oh yeah, I just found this on the beach, like driftwood.
He's clearly got a hand in this. He was looking for it. But I think it'll be incredibly interesting to see how it all plays out once the game actually does
I agree.
debut. I'm very excited to see where this takes us.
One final note, just on the note of the outsider. Early on, he has a VO thing that I really like. He says, "What you decide will ripple across the years." When he's talking about how Emily will reclaim her empire. And I think that's and he talks here, the years are long. It's interesting that this might take place over many years, a decade.
Well, also, I mean, we saw it could be a situation where, like, it could just affect the greater outcome of the world, like, at the end of the game.
Sure, of course.
Like we saw that at the end of the first Dishonored, where it's like Emily's a little girl when you're playing the game, but you also see what happens before she dies.
Yeah.
You know, you see her as an old woman at the very end.
Yeah, like, I still think, like, canonically, this has to end before the ending of Dishonored 1.
Yeah.
Like, you see her as an old woman there.
And you see the Corvos no more.
Sure. John Ryan, I think we did it all. You have anything else to say? Any parting thoughts about Dishonored 2?
I'm super stoked for this.
Me too. Very excited. You can bet that we will have for the next, I don't know, 8 months, 10 months. It comes out in spring 2016 for Xbox One, PS4, PC. We're going to be covering Dishonored 2 a whole lot more. So for all things Dishonored, keep it locked to IGN.